She cackled, cackled in the lot. Next time she cackled in the pot. That's a hen cackle. And this is Art Rosenbaum, and this is Coviddle. And it was my great pleasure to be out in Port Townsend last festival in 2019, and we're doing these workshops. I'm honored to have been invited to do an alumnus workshop in the banjo slot. And what I'm going to do is follow some of my interests, which are old-time tunings and traditional styles of picking. And I'm going to go through quite a lot of material, so I hope that you'll have some kind of technical ability to slow down things or replay something that's of interest. If you were sitting here as a group, which I wish you were, anyone tuned in, I could say, well, what are you interested in that I might be able to help you with? Because I know some of you are experienced players and play a lot of stuff I probably don't or can't play, and others might be a little newer to the old-time banjo. And I'm going to approach it from the angle of the singer-songster mostly, banjo going with a singer, and that goes back to West African roots of the American banjo. And I love to play with groups, love to play with fiddlers and guitar players, and play in string bands, and have done that over many years. But I also like the banjo just by itself or with the human voice. And that's where a lot of these tunings come in. W. Guy Bruce, let me show you a picture of W. Guy Bruce. This is an old-time banjo picker, a friend of mine, late W. Guy Bruce from Tryon, Georgia. It used to be called Screamersville, the area he was from. And this picture was taken about 1917, and he's playing the banjo, and his cousin Jim Bruce is beating straws, which is sometimes done on the fiddle, but also on the banjo, these sticks that keep rhythm when they didn't have another instrument like the banjo or later the guitar to keep rhythm. And Guy Bruce knew a lot of good stories and a lot of banjo tunes and a lot of picking styles. And here's one thing I remember him telling me one day. He said, feller asked me the other day, want you to show me some chords on the banjo. And I said, devil, I can't do it. And the fellow said, can't do it? Well, how come you pick so good? And I said, well, I don't pick by the chord, I pick by the note. And what he meant was the bluegrass banjo players who play mostly in this open G tuning, D, G, B, D, fifth string is a high G. They will chord. They play chords, several notes at once, whereas the old-timers did what he called noting, and that means often you just play one string at a time. You stop it, or you pull off, or you hammer on, or you slide on it, but just finger one string up the neck at a time, sometimes two, but that's called noting. And he said he was more of a noter than a chorder. And that's a good way to get started. So let's get started. I'm going to go through some different tuning families, because there's this open G chord that probably most of you know, and then there's some variants of that that you retune for special effects, and then there's a bunch of tunings in C, and there's a bunch of tunings that we call a sawmill or the Shady Grove tunings, and there's some D tunings, and then there's some odd orphan tunings that are used for just one song. Lots and lots of them, and we won't have time to go through all of them, but we'll go through a few, and we'll start with the G tuning, and we'll start with noting, and do a little picking styles along with it. Well, Pete Seeger, who gave me my start when I was intrigued by some old-time records of old-timer banjo players on Folkways Anthology back in the 50s when I was a high school kid in Indianapolis. How do you learn to play the banjo? Well, I got this book. This is my book, revised 1962, but it's the third edition, and it opened my eyes to a lot of things. Later on, I got to meet a lot of the old-timers in person in Indiana East Kentucky, North Carolina, and picked up a lot of things from them. But that got me started. And he had a lick that he called a basic strum, where you'd pick up on a string, brush down. It's bump, diddy, bump. I thought that'd be a little easier than frailing or claw hammered, because hitting down's a little counterintuitive. You add to that a hammered note. Or a pulled note. As appropriate. And there can be a slide. I hadn't planned to start with Cripple Creek. Everything in it that I had been talking about, plus double thumbing, where the second note in the little bunch of quarter notes or eighth notes is played with the thumb. Single notes. I was planning to do Sourwood Mountain. Let's do Sourwood Mountain. So many pretty girls, just can't count them. And I switched to the downstroke, or the claw hammer, or the overhand, or the framin. A lot of different names, and it derives from old African ways of stroking downward on these stringed instruments. Basically, if you hit a single note, sometimes it can be a number of notes, with the back of a finger. I like the index finger, with a brush down and then bounce back with the fifth string. Just has a little different texture. You can vary that with drop thumb. As the hand comes down, the thumb drops on an inside string, comes back up on the outside string. And the same pulls and hammers. Back to up picking. Ed Teague, my old friend from Rabun County, Georgia, the late Ed Teague, played his whole life, almost 80-some years, with this lick, just the index finger. Not brushing, but just playing with the back of his in it. He liked that sound. Bascom Lamar Lunsford in North Carolina, a famous lawyer, festival organizer, banjo player, minstrel of the Appalachians. His variant was usually, instead of brushing down, to come up with the index finger. I switched off a little bit when I got to the first string. Then there's the thumb lead, where instead of leading with the index, you lead with the thumb. Where the index finger is the kickoff note, so it's thumb, then back to the fifth string, index, and you put your hammers in the secondary beat, and the pulls, and you can keep it flowing along, or you can go ump diddy, ump diddy, ump diddy. I know this is old stuff to most of you, so that's why I'm rushing through it. But if these basic licks are new to some people in this workshop, I'm just kind of giving you the basics, and you'll see a lot of variants as we go through these different tunings. Pete Steele, my banjo hero, that was on some old Library of Congress records that Alan Lomax made in the late 30s. I got to meet him in the 50s and was amazed by his friendliness and all the different ways he played and tuned the banjo. He played most of these styles, up picking, down picking, frailing, two-finger picking. His variant was this. Which was thumb, index, usually finished with a pinch. And that would fit with singing songs that were sort of drawn out, that weren't of a given meter, like the old-fashioned song, "Well, the war is a-raging and poor Johnny has to fight, and I long to," and you could just keep that going and let the vocal line be free. So he's singing something like this. "Oh, the war is a-raging, and poor Johnny has to fight, and I long to be with Johnny from morning until night." So pinch being the first and thumb strings. Just doing something like that, and then throwing that in, and your hammers and your pulls. Well, I said we're going to get into some tuning, so let's get into some tunings. Variants of the G tuning. Buell KZ from Magoffin County, Kentucky. I got to meet him in his later years. I recorded him doing Barbara Allen, one of the most well-known, beautiful old ballads. He said he never recorded on the old 78s because it was too long. And he tuned his thumb string down to E. Why do that? Well, it just adds a little different atmosphere, to use Wade Ward's term, a little different sound. And I'll sing a little bit of Barbara Allen. He also had a lick where he sometimes would bring his thumb up on the index string. He also did what I call the ipit, which is index, pull, index, thumb, ITIT. After the first lead note, you just kind of pull on usually the first string. Follow it with a single note down on the first string, and then the thumb note. Well, here's a little bit, just one verse of Barbara Allen. Y'all can find lots of versions with all the verses, but if I'd sing it, then I'd use up half the time for this workshop. Style, unlike the hoedown style, it has a more regularized rhythm, and you can stretch out some of the vocal phrases. We're back to the regular G tuning. Let me try just a verse of Going Down the Road Feeling Bad, the way I heard it from Smoky Mountain Cass Moore, who was one of the first old-time banjo pickers I met when I was in college. I worked in Michigan, in a hotel on Lake Michigan, and would hang out with the migrant farm workers who were blueberry pickers nearby. And Smoky Mountain Cass Moore was an old-timer, didn't even have a banjo, and he told his friends, well, I could pick a banjo, but I don't have a banjo, so I brought him one. And he sang and picked, sort of in that up-picking style, but this was his take on it. Going down the road feeling bad, going down the road feeling bad, going down the road feeling bad. Well, I ain't gonna be treated this way. And lots of versions and lots of verses. But let's go on to another variant of the G tuning. And we call that low bass. What I've done is I've tuned the fourth string, the bass string, down an octave lower than the G on the third string. Wash my jumper, starch my overalls, ride a train, they call a cannonball from Buffalo to Washington. Bound to miss me when I'm gone, bound to miss me when I'm gone, solid gone. A lot of tunes you can play with that low bass. The G tunings, of course, can be used for A, the key of A, if you just move up one whole fret. And so you can tune your banjo up to, say, A, C sharp, E, and you've tuned, use the capo or tune the strings, but then you have to tune the thumb string up. And Tommy Jarrell played John Brown's Dream with a low bass in the key of A, I believe. Something to that. Let's tune the second string down to A. Let's go down from there. Which actually would be B. Let me remove the capo so the notes are low G, G again, A, D, and run this back down to where we were before, to G. Rufus Chris played an old hymn called Happy Land in that tuning, but I worked out a little ditty called Got a Little Home to Go To. Let's see if I can get a little of that for you. And you really utilize the low bass, and also having tuned the second string down, you get the opportunity to hammer back up. Saddle old Mike, I tell you, I'm going away to leave you. Way out to East Texas to eat cornbread and molasses. So, got a little home to go to, got a little home to go to, got a little home to go to, and I'm going to go there now. Adam and Eve in the garden, studying human nature. Up jumps Satan behind the stump, hit him in the face with a tater. Got a little home in Georgia, got a little home to go to, got a little home in Georgia, and I'm gonna go there now. Stayed in tune to that low G, didn't it? And I'm talking to Mac McComb, who is my neighbor and banjo picker across the street here in Athens, Georgia, and he's doing all the video and audio work. And thanks to him, so I don't forget to acknowledge later on. Well, what I did was I raised up the bass string from the low bass to C. And if I do this little fingering with the middle finger or the ring finger on the second fret of the second string and the middle finger on the second fret of the bass string, I have your G chord that you'd get in the open G tuning. D, G, B, D. But since you drop those strings down a whole tune, then you get the opportunity to do some hammers and pulls. And then if you play this little figure with the middle finger on the third fret of the second string and the first finger at the second fret of the first string, you get a C chord and you get that low C note. So I'm playing in the key of G. Well, the old timers didn't really talk about keys very much. Guy Bruce said, whenever I was a sprout and a banjo picking, we didn't talk about G or C or D. We talked about the Shout Lula key or the Greenback key or the Shady Grove key. Well, we can talk about keys. So this is G going to C. lick where you can get that low C note. So let's go on to something, on a little excursion. Shall we do that? Into different tuning, and then we'll go back to some of these G tunings. But that was going from G to C. Let's start with C. Let's start with this little figure here and see what we come up with. Little birdie, come sing to me your song. Got a short time to stay here and a long time to be gone. Well, Mac was just saying he's noticing I'm doing some little different licks with my right hand. Pete Steele showed me some interesting things to do with Little Birdie. Now this is Little Birdie tuning when you go from C down to here. Pete Steele did this for a break. Where he actually used the bass string, some pinched it, and also uses a drone. A lot of pulls on the left hand, and it just sounded good to him and sounds good to me. I don't necessarily try to play all the tunes I've learned from folks note for note, but I tried to retain that. So that's a Little Birdie tuning, a C tuning out of this variation of the G tuning. If you tune this fifth string down to E, that's another variation. If you prefer that lower thumb string, it's a free country. You can do it. When we were in a Little Birdie tuning, what I've done now is I've raised up the bass string back to D and left the second string down at A. So if you put down just one finger at the second fret, you get your G chord. We call that the Willie Moore tuning because on the old 78 that we heard reissued on the Harry Smith anthology, Dick Burnett, blind banjo picker and singer, and the duo Burnett and Rutherford did Willie Moore, an old unusual ballad, using that tuning. I'll sing a verse of an old ballad, just one verse. You can look up the others. It's a long ballad, but it has almost the same tune, and you can see why we use that dropped second string. She cared nothing of me, and tomorrow morning about 8 o'clock, little Margaret, my bride shall see. He picked another woman, and little Margaret, well, it gets worse from there, and there are lots of verses, and so look up Little Margaret or Lady Margaret. It's one of the old child ballads. Since we're talking about noting, when I visited Pete Steele, he played a banjo version of Gray Eagle, which is one of the old fiddle tunes. And he didn't attempt to play like some of the round peak players like Kyle Creed to play all the notes of a fiddle tune on the banjo. He turned it mostly into a banjo tune. Here's how he played it. Well, here's how I played it. Since Pete Seeger had visited him a while before, he thought I might play this recording that I was making for Pete Seeger, and he said, tell that boy you note the thumb string on that. That's a little unusual. You just get those notes on the fifth string. In a bit we're going to do that on the Cannonball Blues. I'm going to sneak that in, but usually the thumb string is just played open. The Gray Eagle. And now I'm going to do the Shady Grove bit. Should I go right into it?
Continuously? Yeah, 13 more minutes to roll, so I got you.
Okay. Well, here's a tuning that you go to right from the G tuning, and one of the things I'm trying to do here is sort of give some tips on navigating from one of these tunings to another, how you just modify and where you go, not just call out the notes. So you got your G tuning, and then you raise the second string up to a C note, and it's bring it up one fret. And that's what's called the sawmill tuning or mountain modal tuning. I guess that got in there because it fits with some of these gapped scales that the musicologists call modes. And a lot of tunes go with that, and lots of you, I'm sure, play tunes in that tuning. One of the well-known ones is Cuckoo Bird. I'll do a verse of that. Oh, the cuckoo is a pretty bird. She wobbles as she flies. She never hollers cuckoo till the 4th of July. I'll build me a log cabin on a mountain so high, so I can see Lori as she goes riding by. I did a little drop thumb there, a little ipit, and one of these kind of ruscato rolls. Tom Ashley used that when he did the Cuckoo Bird. And you can play Shady Grove in that tuning. Shady Grove, my little love. Shady Grove, I say. Shady Grove, my little love, bound to move away. Guy Bruce would have said, that's not the Shady Grove key. You got to change it some more. What do? Well, you raise up the bass of 3 frets to F. And then you drop the thumb string to this note, the 3rd fret of the 1st string. And that happens to be also an F. So you have F, F, G, C, D. And that's a Shady Grove tuning, or Shady Grove key. Buell KZ played it in a 2-finger style when I visited him in Winchester, Kentucky, years ago. He usually played a different overhand style, but he did it like this. And why would you change the tuning? Well, for a couple reasons. One is this note sustains underneath the other notes. You don't have to hold it down, and it gives you a nice undertone. And also, when you go up to the 5th fret and go down there, you get a little melodic figure. Dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun. It's a little more melodic than just hitting the melody on the mostly on the downbeat. And up in Welcome Hill, formerly known as Screamersville, Georgia, Guy Bruce used that tuning, the Shady Grove tuning. Shady Grove, Sugar Betty Ann, Shady Grove, I say. Shady Grove, Sugar Betty Ann, bound to leave this place. Sugar Betty Ann's a nice young girl, she's so hard to please. Some cold out, she's alone, hope I jinx she'll freeze. Shady Grove, Sugar Betty Ann, Shady Grove, I say. Shady Grove, Sugar Betty Ann, bound to leave this place. So that's the Shady Grove. That's the Shady Grove key played in that interesting variation of the sawmill tuning. Now let's see, let's do another variation. Let's tune the thumb string back up to G. Are F, G, C, D, and up to a high G. And Sidney Myers played a lovely little tune called Twin Sisters. John Cohen recorded that, and if you want to get a very good recording, get the rounder recording called High Atmosphere, where John Cohen, my good old friend who passed away last year, did such wonderful work in filmmaking and recording and performing and so many things. That was one of his fine projects, High Atmosphere, and he emphasized some of these old tunings, got the old timers to use them. Sidney Myers played Twin Sisters in the tuning, the sawmill tuning with a raised up bass string. Let's see what I can do with it. Here's Twin Sisters. Okay, now we're going to go to a new family of tunes. Okay, from there I just took the bass string back to D, and the second string back down to B. So we're in the open G tuning where we started, and so we're going to go to another family of tunings, C tunings. Let's drop the string back down to C, the bass string, and let's raise the second string up to C. And we've got what a lot of you call the double C tuning, where you have two C's. C, G, C, D, and high G. And if you put one finger down on the second fret of the first string, you get a C chord. And my friend George Gibson, who is an expert on banjo history, and he grew up with a banjo in East Kentucky, in Knott County, Kentucky, he talks about the C tunings being the one finger, the two finger, and the no finger C tunings. And so we're starting with the one finger to get a C chord. And that's a tuning a lot of old timers started with. And here's what they started picking. Several have said they start, well, what is your first tune? Shout Lulu. Because all you have to do is tune your banjo like that and kind of do a minimal noting on the first string. Shout little Lulu, shout your best, your grandmother's in the hornet's nest. Hop over to another string if you want. Let's add a few more licks. Shout, what the hell you shouting about? When I was sick and had to go to bed, sent for little Lou to hold my head. Shout, 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 what the hell you shouting about? Well, Guy Bruce didn't say what the hell you shouting about, but I think Rufus Crisp did. Everyone has a version of Shout Lulu, and I put in some. Well, there are a lot of tunes you can play in that key. Let's make it do a little double service and get it up into D. So you can use a capo. I'm not against the capo. The notes are D, A, D, E, and you have to tune the fifth string up. And if you play with fiddlers a lot, you know, they'll play some tunes in C, but they'll want to play Soldier's Joy. Straightforward version of Soldier's Joy. Well, I'll stay here in D when this one finger C tuning raised up. One time when I was, just starting out, going down to East Kentucky, Southern Indiana, and trying to find people who knew old-time banjo. I picked up a kid hitchhiking down in Leslie County, Kentucky, and I said, where around here can I find someone who knows how to play old-time banjo, picks old-time banjo? He said, you stop any house along this road. And that really was banjo country. I said, where should I stop first? He says, well, stop and hear Omi Rose. And so I introduced myself and my friend to Omi Rose. Lived in a little house across the creek, and her husband was at home. He was a coal miner, and she was a banjo picker and singer. She sang Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor, and she did a breakdown. Seems to be known around that part of the country. Go to Rocky Island, go Rocky Hill, go to Rocky Island, get my bottle filled. There's a lot more verses to it. It's an old breakdown. Well, that was the one finger C tuning. What about the two-finger C tuning? Well, let's get the second string down to B, where it was in the G tuning. This will be your G chord. Here we are talking about some chords. C, you have to put two fingers down. Second fret of the first string, first fret of the second string, and make an F chord like this. Third fret of the first string, first fret of the second of the third, back to G. Guy Bruce called that the greenback key. And he sang a song called Greenback. Higher you are for the greenback, higher you are for the change, higher you are for the greenback, boys can't get away with me. Raccoon got a ring around tail, possum tail goes bare, rabbit's got no tail at all, just totes a bunch of hair. Higher you are for the greenback, higher you are for the change, higher you are for the greenback, boys can't get away with me. A lot of verses to that one too. Raccoon got a bushy tail, a beaver tail is flat, rabbit's got no tail at all, but he can't help that. Well, let's go to the no finger C tuning. So let's go back up. Let's tune the second string back up to C. And the first string, which is D, let's go up to E. And that's an open C tuning. And that's a kind of a bright, happy sounding tuning, kind of vigorous tuning. Rather than try to describe what it sounds like, let me do a couple of little pieces in it. Handsome Molly's good tune, and I'll try to play it the way Tom Paley, the late great Tom Paley, who did so much for the music, the way he played it, sort of. I were in London or some other seaport town, set my foot in a steamboat and sail the whole world round. While sailing round the ocean, sailing round the sea, think of handsome Molly wherever she might be. And goes on from there, a lot of verses. See these little figures that I'll throw in there. Uncle Dave Macon, the Dixie Dewdrop, used that tuning a lot. And his music was syncopated, a lot of it derived from African American songs, as this surely was, railroading and gambling. And I don't play it too much, but I'll try to sketch it out for you. Let me do it again. You cut that out?
Yeah, I can. A couple other little variations, or maybe one more variation on the C tuning. This is your double C tuning. Well, let's drop the thumb string to E, matching the second fret of the first string. Yonder above the sky, a red bird nest in a jaybird's eye. Buckeye Jim, you can't go weave and spin. You can't go, Buckeye Jim. So you use that as a melody note. Pete Steele did a heavy-loaded freight train in that tuning. He said when he was a boy in East Bernstein, Kentucky, he used to boys put soap on the track cause the engine has slipped the driver wheel. You kids don't try that at home, kind of dangerous. But they made up a little piece where the train was going up the hill, sounded sort of like this.
That sounded pretty good to me, and that dropped thumb string gave you that note, but also in the fast part, he played the thumb string first and the second string second in the drop thumb sequence. Speed up. Wouldn't have sounded good if you did it in a normal way. Would have sounded just ordinary, don't you think? Let's do a couple of tunes in F. Well, if you want to play some tunes in F or G in a little different way, let's go back to the sawmill tuning. And make this little formation. And drop the, well, no, let's leave it. Let's leave it. Let's leave it up here at G. This would be an F chord. This would be a B flat, where you jump these two fingers over. You get this little formation, if you can see it. And this would be a C. And good for Frankie was a good girl. And Frankie was a good girl, everybody knows. Spent $100 for Abba one suit of clothes. He's her man, he done her wrong. I'll pick it one time. Couple of breakdowns. Let me see if let me do Buck Creek Girl, which goes to this minor figure, and then I'll do the Ramblin' Hobo. And the Ramblin' Hobo, Pete Steele said that was played by a guy down in Harlan, Kentucky, who was drafted into the Army in the First World War. And as he was leaving at the depot, he stood at the train door and got his banjo and said, "This is my farewell piece. I don't believe I'm ever coming back." And he picked this tune. It's something called Ramblin' Hobo, but Pete Steele remembered it as the farewell tune, and the fellow never did come back from the First World War. Buck Creek Girls and Ramblin' Hobo, if I can get through them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Girls want to go to Crip Creek girls want to go to town. Here's a Ramblin' Hobo. And here's another thing you can do with that tuning. You can play some tunes in G. Those were all in F. So you just use the same formation. And let's leave the thumb string. It's not in tune with all the kind of chord formations, but it'll sound all right. Sometimes I play with fiddlers and they say, well, next tune's going to be in G, and I've been playing open G. I said, wait a minute, I got to raise the second string, and I've got to put the capo on, and they say, well, we're still in G, but I said, well, we're going to play G like this. That's Sally Johnson. Or you could call it Katie Hill. Okay, we're in the double C tuning. Now, I think I've got up a little bit. I can't really see this very well. Or maybe because of the angle. Got a little sharp. Not too far, but... Okay, is it rolling? Okay, we're at the, let's finish off the C tunings with just one other little variant tuning. The very first time I met George Gibson was at an event, a fiddle contest down in Florida, and he walked up to me. I was carrying a banjo case, and without any preamble, he said, Pete Seeger says you play Darling Corey in the open D tuning. We're going to get to that tuning next. But no, you play it in the Darling Corey tuning. I said, well, what's that? And he said, well, this is the way they played it around Knott County, Kentucky when I was growing up. And he showed it to me. And it's, you take the double C tuning, and just you take the first string, and you play at unison. You tune it down to C. Same as the second string. And well, let me just play a little bit and see if you like the sound of it. Wake up, darling Corey, what makes you sleep so sound? The revenue officers are coming, gonna tear your steel house down. That's Darling Corey tuning. What note is this? F. Is that F? E. You could also drop the thumb string down to match the fourth fret of the first string. See if you like that better. Little variation with the lower fifth string. Okay, now we're going to go to the D tunings, and that'll take me a minute. Let me see if I have a picture of Jake Staggers in here. Oh, shit. Can I give it a little plug for my books? Is it still running?
I think that's only you definitely should.
Yeah. What?
I think you most definitely should.
Is it running?
It is running right now.
Okay. Well, we're going to go to the D tunings in a minute. I've got this book here. I'll plug. It's the latest of the banjo books I did. It's got two DVDs in the back cover that my son Neil did a few years ago, and it's got 47 tunings, if you're not getting enough today, and you can reference them. And it's got entire songs and tunes and a lot of this kind of material, and I'm pretty pleased with this book. And also my wife Margot did some of the photographs in here. Love this photograph of Mike Seeger. He did so much for the music, maybe as much for the old time music as anyone. Through a long career. We really miss Mike. I like this photograph of him. I'll flip one page over, or a couple pages over. A couple women playing the banjo. Maybelle Cawthorn from here in Georgia, who served hard time in Hardwick Prison for women for selling pot to a Georgia Bureau of Investigation undercover agent. There's a whole story there. Great banjo picker. No time for the story today. And the great Libba Cotton, better known for her guitar playing, but she was a banjo picker. And the banjo, as I said before, of course, came from Africa, and there were a few really fine African-American traditional banjo players up into the 20th century. Fewer as the century wore on. We met one fellow up in Toccoa, Georgia, Jake Staggers, and he played a tune called 74, and he used the D tuning, and let me show you how to get into that. We're back in G. You drop this third string down to F sharp, and then you drop the second string down to A, a whole tone, and that's what we did for the Willie Moore tuning. But now you have a D chord, and not finished, we got to lower the thumb string to another F sharp. So you've got D, F sharp, A, D, F sharp, and C sharp. Take that up. C.C. Conway's traced that tuning back to at least the 18th century, and might go back to Africa. Jake Staggers, African-American banjo player of Toccoa, did this song. You might have heard a version of it. 500 miles from my home, from my home, darling, 500 miles from my home. 74, blow station, blow, blow like she never gonna blow no more. Blow like she never gonna blow no more. You might know that as Old Reuben. Sometimes it's called a Reuben tuning. And Doc Watson, lots of people do different versions of Old Reuben. Train 45, there's hundreds of different versions. Let me do a little bit of that. When the train left town, saw a train go down. Hey, the whistle blow 100 miles. I'm 1, I'm 2, 3, Lord, I'm 4. 500 miles from my home. When old Reuben left home, he was about 9 days old. When he come back, he's a full-grown man. Well, they got old Reuben down, took his watch and charm, everything that poor boy had. Down in Seaport City was a sporting little town, dudes all standing around. Well, the chief of police and the captain too drove them dudes right out of town. Let your Reuben, oh Reuben, oh Reuben, where you been so long? I was wondering what I'd use to demonstrate this dead tuning, and so I was fooling around with New River Train. Wade Ward played a version of that. I'm not sure. I don't think he used this tuning though. I'm leaving on that New River train, leaving on that New River train. Oh, same old train that brought me here, soon gonna carry me away. Let me do it again. This has to be perfect. Leaving on that New River train, leaving on that New River train. Oh, same old train brought me here, soon gonna carry me away. That was a little unusual second part that Wade Ward put into that, and I think it fitted pretty well in this tuning. Well, let's do the to finish up this little grouping, instead of going there from the D group, let's go to a tuning that Doc Boggs used a lot, one of the more atmospheric tunings. And we can go to it from the G tuning. Let's drop the second string down to A. Same as the Willie Moore tuning. And let's take the thumb string down to the first string at 4, which gives you an F sharp note from G to F sharp. Well, you could do Wild Bill Jones in that tuning, but let's go right to the Hustlin' Gambler tuning and bring this down to C, so you can get that hammer. Come on, you hustling gamblers, when I have money to spend, tomorrow might be Monday, and I'll neither have a dollar nor a friend. Go dig me a hole in the meadow, good people. Go dig me a hole in the ground. Come around, all you good people, to see this poor rounder go down. That's a real lonesome tuning. I got to hear Doc Boggs in person at New York, the Friends of Old Time Music, an organization that I was working with Ralph Rinsler, Izzy Young, and John Cohen. Brought some of the people that we just thought were legends long gone, like Mississippi John Hurt and Doc Boggs from Kentucky. Heard their records and never thought we'd see them in New York City playing very well in person, and there they were. And Mike Seeger had found Doc Boggs in a Norton, Virginia telephone book, Doc Boggs, and he said he didn't know who was more surprised, him to meet Doc Boggs or Doc Boggs to meet him. Doc Boggs hadn't been playing much, but Mike got him going again, and he kind of had a second career. Same with Mississippi John Hurt. And I just treasure having met some of these old timers and heard them. Some I didn't spend much time with, and some I spent a lot of time with. Anyway, let me do a couple more tunes in a different tuning, and I'll use a different banjo, and probably used up the time. This is going to be a task for Mac to edit it down to workshop time. See a little sailing boat on that? And I designed on the peg head of this one.
Oh,
Square rigger.
On the top, yeah.
Yeah, I designed that, and for that reason, because I'm as I told you, I'm a kind of a sailing freak. Well, on this workshop, I've been playing this banjo, and it's kind of an unusual looking instrument. Intrigued me. I saw it advertised on John Bernuzio's website, and it was one of 7 good banjos that were made by the late Charles Paddock. He made some archtop guitars, and he was a luthier and an engineer, and made some really interesting instruments. This has a tubaphone ring. It has beautiful woodwork. It weighs a ton, and it has a nice bass tone, and you can play loud on it. It has a nice crack, and it also has a little subtlety to it. And it tunes really well. So I've enjoyed playing this Paddock banjo. He only made 2 open back banjos, and the others were resonator bluegrass type banjos. And for the last couple little pieces I'm going to play and demonstrate a couple of tunings. I'll use this Wildwood Banjo, and I've played Wildwood Banjos for years, made by Mark Platten. He was out in California, then he moved to Bend, Oregon, and he was a wonderful banjo maker. And since I'm kind of a maritime freak, I designed a little sailing ship on the peg head. Well, let me close with a couple of pieces in a different tuning, and you can get to them different ways. But let's start with your double C tuning, and let's just drop the third string down to F, from G to F. That's easy enough. And then let's drop the thumb string down to F. Third fret of the first string will give you that sound. And that's got a lot of open strings, so you do mostly noting on that. And you can get some hammers and pulls and here's a tune that Chesley Chansey, banjo picker that I knew up in Cherry Log, Georgia. That's in Gilmer County, just a little north of where we are now, about an hour's drive, would you say? He had been a moonshiner back in his youth and banjo picker. He had a family string band and great fellow. And he played Cumberland Gap in this tuning, but I like this little tune called Mulberry Gap. And it's not very hard, but it's pretty. I'll play it slow first. Mulberry Gap, and close off with a Hobart Smith tune called Last Chance, and enjoyed trying to do this workshop here for Coviddle tunes, if I can get my voice around that pronunciation, and appreciate all the hard work that's been done to go into this virtual festival, and we're looking for fiddle tunes back in Port Townsend next year. So it won't be our last chance, but I'll play Last Chance. I used to play it in the same tuning, and then I realized that Hobart Smith did tune the bass string up to D. So the notes are F, D, E, C, D. And that's to let that note just resound open. It's done up there, as Guy Bruce said. You don't have to note it. Bye, folks. That's the end.
That's good.
Don't break your camera.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot of the old timers when we would photograph them. Margot would say, "Can I take your picture?" And they say, "If you're not afraid, I'll break your camera." That would be a standard way some of the mountain people would talk us. They always have that. Put my mask back on so you can't recognize who I am.